They said love is simple, but for Emily, it had never been simple at all. On the day of her wedding, she stood at the entrance of the hall, her heart beating faster than the music playing inside. Everyone's eyes turned toward her, watching, wondering. They knew her choice, and they whispered about it. She was marrying a man who lived with a disability, a man who moved through life in a wheelchair. Some admired her courage, others doubted her decision. Yet for Emily, it wasn't courage. It was love, plain, honest, and steady. She saw Daniel not for what he could not do, but for the kindness in his smile, the patience in his voice, and the warmth in his soul. As she took her first step into the hall, her heart whispered a prayer, that this moment would be more than a ceremony. She didn't know that hidden behind the vows and the music, a surprise awaited her, one that would change not just her wedding day, but the course of her life forever. The soft notes of a piano filled the air, echoing gently through the hall. Emily stood at the entrance, her fingers clutching the delicate fabric of her gown, her breath uneven. It was the moment every bride dreams of, yet for her, the weight of the world seemed to rest upon her shoulders. The guests turned their heads, and for a brief moment, silence stretched across the room. She could feel their eyes on her, measuring, questioning, wondering why she had chosen this path. Some smiled kindly, but others could not hide the flicker of doubt in their expressions. Her gaze lifted slowly, following the aisle to the figure at the end. Daniel sat in his wheelchair, his posture calm, his eyes steady. He wore his suit with quiet dignity, his tie perfectly placed, though his hands trembled slightly as he rested them on the wheels of his chair. But when their eyes met, the nervousness within her softened. In that single look, she saw not weakness, but strength, not limitation, but love. Emily had known Daniel for 3 years. She had met him in the library, where his warm laughter had caught her attention before his wheelchair ever did. Over time, she had learned his story, how an accident had changed the way he moved through the world, but not the kindness he carried within him. And now, on this day, she was ready to walk toward him, to bind her life with his, no matter the whispers or doubts that circled around them. She took her first step. The gown brushed against the polished floor, the soft tap of her shoes echoing like steady heartbeats. Each movement forward felt like a promise to herself that she was not here out of pity, not out of sacrifice, but out of love deeper than appearances, stronger than fear. Her father, walking beside her, held her arm with a firm yet trembling grip. His silence spoke more than words. A mixture of pride and worry pressed into each step. She could sense his unease, his lingering hope, that she had chosen wisely, that her future would not be weighed down by difficulty. Yet Emily's heart was clear. She knew what she wanted. And with every step closer to Daniel, the whispers behind her began to fade, replaced by the sound of her own steady breathing and the sight of the man who waited at the end of the aisle, his eyes shining like a quiet flame. The sound of the piano faded into silence as Emily reached the altar. Every step she had taken felt like a slow climb up a mountain, but now she stood at the peak, her heart pounding, her lips trembling with a smile she tried to steady. Daniel's eyes lifted to hers. There was no pity in them, no shadow of regret. Only love, pure and certain. He shifted slightly in his chair, straightening his posture as if to meet her with all the dignity he could gather. "Hi," he whispered, his voice soft, just for her. Emily's lips curved, her own whisper breaking the silence between them. "Hi." Her hand slid gently into his. The warmth of his palm sent calm through her veins, easing the weight of the stairs behind her. The whispers she had feared so much seemed to vanish in the quiet exchange between their eyes. The officiant, A kind older man with silver hair cleared his throat and began the ceremony. His voice was calm, each word falling like a blessing. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Emily and Daniel in marriage. Emily barely heard the words. Her attention was caught by Daniel's faint smile, by the way his thumb brushed lightly against the back of her hand, steadying her. She thought of the moments that had brought them here. The late nights when they had spoken about dreams and fears, the afternoons when he had taught her to see life, not as a race to be won, but as a journey to be cherished. A soft breeze drifted through the tall windows, carrying the scent of roses into the hall. Somewhere in the front row, a guest sniffled quietly, dabbing a handkerchief to their eyes. Emily noticed, but she didn't turn to see who it was. The moment belonged only to her and Daniel. Marriage, the officiant continued, is not built on perfection, but on patience, on kindness, and on love that endures through seasons both easy and hard. Emily's eyes stung with tears. She thought of the years to come, of the challenges ahead. Yes, there would be difficulties, but there would also be laughter, comfort, and the unshakable strength of standing together. As Daniel's hand squeezed, hers softly, Emily realized, this was not the end of a choice she had made. This was the beginning of a life they would create together, step by step, day by day. The hall grew quiet again, as though every breath had paused to listen. The officiant nodded kindly toward Emily, signaling it was time for her vows. Her heart fluttered. She had rehearsed these words 100 times in her mind, yet standing before Daniel now, her voice caught in her throat. She squeezed his hand, steadying herself, and then began, her voice trembling but clear. Daniel, she whispered, from the very first day I met you, I saw a kindness in you that the world doesn't always show. You taught me that strength isn't always about standing tall, but about rising, even when life tries to hold you down. You showed me that love doesn't look for perfection. It grows through patience, laughter, and gentle care. Today I promise to walk beside you, in every step we can take together, and even in the moments when walking is hard. I promise to love you, not for what the world sees, but for who you are, my partner, my friend, and my home. Tears glistened in her eyes, and a quiet murmur swept through the guests. Some dabbed their cheeks, others bowed their heads, moved by the honesty in her words. The officiant gave a soft nod to Daniel. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his position, his voice low but steady when he began. Emily, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. When I met you, I thought I had nothing to give. My body was broken and I believed my dreams had ended. But then you walked into my life and somehow you saw me. Not the chair, not the scars, just me. You gave me hope again. You gave me love again. Today I promise to protect that love. With everything I have, I promise to listen when you speak, to hold you when you're tired, and to believe in us when days feel heavy. You are my strength, Emily. You are my miracle. Emily's breath caught, and the hall seemed to shimmer with warmth. The vows had been spoken, not in grandeur or eloquence, but in truth. And in that truth, every doubt, every whisper from the past began to fade, leaving only the sound of their hearts beating in unison. The officiant closed the book softly and looked at them with kind eyes. Now, he said gently, we will exchange the rings, symbols of your promise, circles with no end like the love you vow to share. Emily's father stepped forward, holding a small velvet box. Her hands trembled as she opened it, the simple silver band resting inside. She lifted it carefully, her fingers brushing against Daniel's as she placed the ring against his hand. Her voice was soft, almost breaking. With this ring, I give you my heart, and all that I am. Daniel's eyes glistened. He guided his hand toward hers, though his movements were slower, more deliberate. He took the golden band from the box, his fingers shaking with both nerves and tenderness. Slowly, with all the patience in the world, he slid it onto Emily's finger. "With this ring," he whispered, his voice steady but full of emotion, "I give you my love, my life, my forever." The room was still. Even the air seemed to pause. The rings were not glittering jewels, not ornate or expensive. They were simple, unadorned. Yet in that simplicity was something rare and precious, a promise built not on wealth or grandeur, but on honesty, courage, and devotion. Emily felt the weight of the ring on her hand, not heavy, but grounding. It was as if the band itself whispered, "To her, you are not alone, you are his, and he is yours." The officiant's smile widened, his voice warm. "May these rings remind you both of the vows you have spoken today, and may they bind your hearts in unbroken unity." Emily looked into Daniel's eyes. In that moment, she saw not the wheelchair, not the scars, not the whispers of doubt. She saw a man who had chosen her and whom she had chosen in return. And around them, the hall filled with the quiet sound of sniffles, soft sighs, and the hushed admiration of those who finally understood. This was not a story of limitation, but of love unshaken by anything the world could place before it. The officiant's voice grew rich with joy, his words carrying through the hall like music. "Emily and Daniel, by the promises you have spoken, by the rings you have exchanged, and by the love that binds you together, I now pronounce you husband and wife." He paused, his smile widening, his voice filled with warmth. "You may now share your first kiss." The guests stirred, leaning forward with quiet anticipation. Emily's heart fluttered wildly in her chest. She turned to Daniel, her veil brushing softly against her shoulders. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fall away. There was no hall, no whispers, no doubt, only the man before her, his eyes glistening with emotion. Daniel gave her a faint, almost nervous smile. "You might have to come closer," he whispered playfully, his voice just for her. Her lips curved into a trembling smile. Slowly, gracefully, she bent toward him, lowering herself so their faces were near. His hand rose, steady though trembling, brushing against her cheek as though she were something delicate, something sacred. And then, with a breath that seemed to hold the whole world, they kissed. It was not rushed. It was not loud or grand. It was soft, gentle, a kiss that spoke of promises deeper than words, of love that had endured doubt, and of a future they would build together. The hall erupted in applause. Some guests clapped eagerly, others stood with tears in their eyes, touched by the beauty of what they had witnessed. The sound filled the room, echoing against the tall windows, mingling with the golden light that poured across the floor. Emily's heart raced, not from fear now, but from joy. She pulled back slightly, her forehead resting softly against Daniel's. They smiled at each other, breathless, their hands still intertwined. In that single moment, every shadow of doubt seemed to vanish. They were not a woman and a man, defined by the world's expectations. They were husband and wife, bound not by circumstance, but by choice, by devotion, and by a love that could not be shaken. The officiant stepped back, his voice warm and proud. "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. and Mrs. Daniel and Emily Carter." The applause swelled once more, but Emily only heard the quiet beat of her own heart, and the steady rhythm of Daniel's, beating in time with hers. The reception hall glowed with warmth. Strings of fairy lights hung across the ceiling, their golden shimmer making the whole room feel like a dream. Tables were set with simple but elegant arrangements of roses and candles, their flames flickering softly as laughter and gentle chatter filled the air. Emily stood beside Daniel at the center of the room. The music began, soft, sweet, the kind of melody that seemed to float rather than play. The guests hushed, watching as the couple prepared for their first dance. Emily bent slightly, her hand resting tenderly in his. "Shall we?" she whispered, her voice playful, her eyes shining. Daniel gave a faint laugh, shaking his head with mock seriousness. "I should warn you, I'm not exactly light on my feet." She leaned closer, her lips brushing his ear as she replied, "That's fine. You don't need feet to dance with me, just your heart." His smile widened, and together they began to move. Emily swayed gently, her dress brushing against his chair as she guided their rhythm. Daniel's hand held hers firmly, his other resting lightly at her waist. They moved slowly, not in perfect steps, but in a perfect moment. The guests watched in silence at first, tears glistening in more than one pair of eyes. Some couples reached for each other's hands, moved by the tenderness before them. Others leaned forward, unable to hide the admiration that replaced the doubts they had once carried. Emily's laughter bubbled softly as she leaned her head close to Daniel's. "See?" she whispered. "You're doing perfectly." Daniel's voice cracked slightly as he replied, "Only because it's with you." The music carried them gently across the floor, not in grand turns or elaborate spins, but in quiet movements that spoke of trust, of comfort, of love deep enough to make the world pause. When the final notes lingered in the air, the hall erupted, in applause, louder and more heartfelt than before. Emily rested her forehead softly against Daniel's, her eyes closing as she whispered, "This is the happiest moment of my life." Daniel's hand squeezed hers gently. His voice was low, almost secretive. "Then hold on, because the night still has a surprise waiting." Emily's eyes opened, her breath catching. She searched his face, but he only smiled faintly, his eyes glimmering with something she couldn't yet name. The applause from the dance slowly faded, replaced by a gentle hush. Daniel's chair was wheeled a little closer to the center of the room, and one of his friends placed a microphone carefully in his hand. Emily's brows lifted in surprise. She hadn't known about this part of the evening. Her hand came to rest lightly on his shoulder. "Daniel?" she whispered, her voice soft with both curiosity and concern. He looked up at her, his smile trembling but steady. "There's something I've kept from you," he said softly into the microphone. His voice carried across the hall, and suddenly, every guest was leaning forward, breath held, waiting. Emily's heart skipped. For a moment, fear touched her chest. Was it something bad? But Daniel's eyes reassured her, glowing with love. "I've told you many times that you saved me," he continued, his voice growing steadier. "That when you walked into my life, you gave me hope again. What I didn't tell you is that for the past year, I've been working on something for you, something to show you that I'm not just the man you chose, but the man who chooses you every day in every way I can." Emily's eyes softened, confusion flickering in them, but also wonder. Daniel nodded toward a friend in the crowd who moved quietly to the corner of the hall. Moments later, the faint sound of piano keys filled the room. The melody was gentle, full of longing and warmth. Emily froze. She knew that tune. It was the same melody Daniel had once hummed to her late at night, the one he had said was unfinished. Daniel lifted the microphone again, his hand trembling, and then he began to sing. His voice was not perfect. It cracked at times, soft and unpolished, but it was raw, real, and filled with love so pure that Emily's eyes blurred with tears. Every word was for her. Every note was a promise. He had written a song, an entire song just for her, crafted in secret through months of practice. poured out in front of everyone they knew, and as the hall listened in stunned silence, Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, her heart breaking open in awe. This was the surprise she had never imagined. The notes of the piano carried Daniel's voice across the hall like a gentle tide. Every word he sang was stitched with memories. Quiet evenings in the library where they first met. The long walks she had pushed him through the park, the laughter they had shared over coffee, the tears they had faced on difficult days. Emily's heart swelled with every verse. The world blurred through the tears that fell freely down her cheeks, yet she never looked away from him. This was not just music, it was the beating of his heart, offered openly, vulnerably, in front of everyone. He sang of the way she had seen him, not as broken but as whole. He sang of the light she had brought into his darkest nights. He sang of a future where every challenge would be softened by love, where every step they could or could not take would still be walked together. The guests sat utterly still, their emotions written across their faces. Some leaned close to their partners, hands entwined tightly. Others simply let the tears fall, moved by the purity of what they were witnessing. As Daniel reached the final verse, his voice cracked, trembling, under the weight of feeling. His eyes opened then, searching only for Emily, his gaze locking with hers as the last words spilled out. "And if the world should fall apart, I'll still be here with you, holding your heart." The piano faded. Silence followed. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Emily could not hold herself back any longer. She dropped to her knees beside his chair, cupping his face in her trembling hands, her tears wetting his skin as she kissed him with all the love in her soul. The hall erupted, not in polite applause, but in thunderous clapping, cheers, and sobs mingled together. It was as though every heart in the room had broken open and poured itself into that single moment. Emily pulled back, her voice shaking as she whispered, "Daniel, it's the most beautiful gift I've ever received." Daniel's eyes shone, a tear slipping down his cheek. "It was always for you. Always." And for a moment the world outside that hall did not exist. Only love, raw and undeniable, filled the air. The applause had not stopped. Guests were on their feet, clapping, some whistling, others openly wiping their tears. The hall had transformed into something alive, something beating with joy and awe. Emily, still trembling from the weight of Daniel's song, reached for the microphone. Her hands shook as she lifted it, but her voice, though soft, carried clear across the room. "I thought today would be the day I gave everything to Daniel," she began, her eyes shimmering. "I thought I would be the one to show him love, to show him that no doubts or whispers could stand in our way. But instead, he's the one who gave me the greatest gift, a song that holds our story, a promise I can hear for the rest of my life." She turned to Daniel, her hand brushing against his shoulder, her smile breaking through tears. "I want everyone here to know something. I didn't marry Daniel because I felt sorry for him. I didn't marry him because of sacrifice. I married him because he is the most extraordinary man I've ever met. He is strong, he is kind, and he loves in a way that teaches me every single day how beautiful life can be." The guests grew quiet again, listening intently, their hearts wrapped in her words. Emily's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "So when you see us, don't see a woman and a man in a wheelchair. See two people who chose each other, two people who believe that love is stronger than circumstance. Because that's what marriage is. It's not about perfection. It's about devotion." Her words hung in the air, sinking deep into every heart. A wave of emotion passed through the room. Couples held hands tighter. Parents pulled their children close. Even those who had once doubted now felt their hearts shift. Emily lowered the microphone, her tears spilling again. though her smile was radiant. She leaned closer to Daniel and whispered just for him. "You've given me forever, Daniel. That's all I've ever wanted." Daniel's eyes glistened, his lips curving into the quietest, most powerful smile. And in that smile, Emily felt everything: home, safety, and love without end. The night had grown quieter. The music had softened, the laughter of guests now a gentle hum as the last conversations drifted across the room. Candles burned low on the tables, their flames dancing faintly, and the fairy lights glowed like stars suspended above. Emily and Daniel sat together near the edge of the hall, away from the crowd. The world beyond the tall windows stretched wide and dark, scattered with real stars that twinkled faintly in the sky. Emily leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, her hand tucked warmly into his. For the first time all evening, silence belonged to them. No applause, no whispers, no eyes watching, only the quiet rhythm of two hearts resting together. "Are you tired?" Daniel asked softly, his thumb brushing against her hand. "A little," Emily whispered, smiling. "But it's the good kind of tired." He chuckled gently, the sound rumbling low. "The kind you get after your whole world changes in one day?" She lifted her head, gazing at him. His eyes shone, not from the lights, but from something deeper. Peace, love, certainty. "Yes," she said, "exactly that kind." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, no words needed. The vows, the rings, the song, it all lingered in the air around them, weaving itself into the beginning of their story. Emily's voice broke the silence again, soft but sure. "You know they were wrong." "Who?" he asked, brow lifting slightly. "The ones who whispered. The ones who doubted. They thought I was giving something up. But they'll never understand. I didn't give anything up." She smiled, her fingers tightening around his. "I gained everything." Daniel's throat tightened, his lips pressing, together as emotion welled inside him. He leaned his forehead gently against hers. "And I promise, Emily, I'll spend my life proving that to you." The hall behind them had almost emptied, but neither noticed. The world seemed small, folded into that single moment where nothing else mattered. Outside, the stars watched silently, distant but steady. Inside, beneath the fading glow of fairy lights, Emily and Daniel sealed the quiet truth of their wedding night. Not just husband and wife, but two souls who had found home in each other. And though surprises had come, though whispers had risen, what remained was simple and unshakable: love. Pure, patient, enduring love.